So before we dig into each of the details of all the different sections here in the Opsix native, we're first just going to get an overview of everything that's going on from a broad sort of perspective so that we have a little bit of understanding of how these parts will fit together later, after which we've seen each of them individually. So starting up at the top toolbar, we have the name on the left and then the browser for programs that can be pulled up. You can click that and load in from the browser any of the different programs in here. We'll look at that in a little bit though. Basically, you can browse around and select the sounds that you'll be able to use here, search for sounds or save them, etc. Then we have our unison settings up here, so you can obviously set this however you're going to use it. Unison being essentially playing multiple voices, detuned and spread to thicken out a sound. We'll look at that in a little while as well. So with that on, you can have multiple voices playing at the same time as you play keys. We'll turn it off though and continue over to our master volume, basically just the program level here. You can click and drag to change by an amount. Holding Alt or Controller Command and clicking and dragging, you can fine tune that level, and that's going to be the case for any parameter that you'd find in here. But grabbing and tweaking values of parameters is pretty standard. Some of them you'll be able to double click and type in a value, but not all of them. But we'll get back to that, continuing through our overview back up here. This is just your overall volume of your output from the Opsix native. You then have a randomize button, which just randomizes all the parameters of the program. So clicking that, and we'll wait just a moment, and it just randomizes all these parameters of the program. You can click it a few times, get some different ideas, and it can obviously change things by a wide margin to get that randomization, and that may trigger further ideas in your mind, and this won't save over the preset or anything. So you can return back to it. That's a good creative tool there. You then have your menu that we saw before, your settings, sound settings. You can initialize, which will just pull up the default preset basically, so kind of your initialized sound. You can pull up the manual, change your size as we saw. Your MIDI CC settings can be cleared or recall the ones from your hardware settings. And as far as linking those MIDI CCs to parameters, it's a matter of just right-clicking on the desired parameter, and then you can choose from the list which CC number you want linked to it. Or you can also just click Learn, at which point you can then choose a knob or control on your MIDI device, turn it, and then it will link to this parameter. So pretty simple MIDI linking. To take that out, you can just go in, right-click again, and set it to None. So again, just some quick and easy MIDI settings that you can get or reset in the menu here. And then you can reload the preset browser basically to refresh it. And you can get your about information for the version number and that sort of thing. Over here now we have our operator edit area, in which we have 6 operators, not oscillators, but operators, because they'll be able to be used for frequency modulation synthesis. It's just the terminology that's used. Each of them will have shapes that you can choose, settings that you can copy and paste to other ones, and change your different parameters relating to each operator. And then from those operators, you're going to be able to do your modulation here, which can be done by algorithm, which is basically taking the different operators shown and using them as carriers and modulators for frequency modulation, essentially. And of course, that can be done in many different ways, which we will get into detail, but there's also the option to use a matrix here, in which case you can take your operators 1 through 6 and link them to each other in this way, as opposed to pre-programmed algorithms. You're a little bit more hands-on in how each of the modulations will be set up in the matrix here. Then below that, we have our sound groups for different parameters, the sound, motion, sequencer, and miscellaneous and random. Of course, just different groups of parameters and options related to these types of groups. And then within the edit area down here, for each of those, we have all of those parameters, of course. So your arpeggiator can be enabled, filter, envelope, and LFO settings. 3 of those to work with, and the LFO shown. A few effects that we can choose from the list here, and some modulations that can be set up by virtual patching. Then down at the bottom, of course, we have our mod and pitch wheels, the amount that we'll be able to pitch bend, the keyboard, and just the play style that's going to be worked with. But overall, everything is nice and centralized here. You can easily get at a lot of the different parameters without having to dig too far to get there. But of course, it is a solid workflow, and there is plenty that we can do with it. We are ready now to start digging into everything up here. We'll start with the operators and algorithms, as that is where the basis of the sound design is going to come from in the Opsix native, and we'll get into that in the next video, so I will see you then.